Hey there, come on in and get comfortable. It's pretty loud out there in the real world, isn't it? But in here it's quiet. Before we get started with the story, just take a second to relax. Find a comfy spot, unclench your jaw, drop your shoulders, and just let all the stress of the day fade away. If you like these deep dives into Hollow Knight lore, maybe hit that subscribe button so you can come back and chill with us again. Alright, close your eyes. Let's get into the story of the Void. Long before the first nail was forged, long before the first stone was laid to build the great kingdom of Hallownest, there was only the silence. It was not the silence of an empty room, nor the quiet of a sleeping house. It was a heavy, living silence, a weight that pressed down upon the world, ancient and absolute. This was the time before the worm, before the light of the Pale King brought order and mind to the bugs of the caverns. In this primordial era, the world below was not defined by the golden glow of civilization, but by the deep, resonant hum of the earth itself. And at the very bottom of the world, in the deepest pit where the stone gave way to something else, there lay the Void. To understand the Void, one must first unlearn the fear of the dark. In the age of Hallownest, darkness is often seen as a threat, a place where monsters hide and where the light of the king cannot reach. But in the beginning, the darkness was not evil. It was simply potential. It was the canvas upon which life would eventually be painted, the still water before the storm. The Void was a substance, yes, a liquid, shifting sea of absolute blackness. But it was also a force. It was the antithesis of the light, not in conflict with it, but existing as its natural counterpart. Where light burns, defines and separates, the Void absorbs, unifies and stills. It is the state of total rest, the final sleep from which no dream arises. In these early days there was a civilization that understood this truth. We know very little of them, for their name has been lost to the erosion of time, ground away by the shifting tectonic plates of the world. We call them simply the ancient civilization. They were not the bugs of Hallownest. They did not worship a king or a queen. They worshipped the Void itself. They did not fear the dark. They revered it. They built their cities not in the bright caverns above, but down in the depths, close to the shore of that great black sea. We can see the remnants of their devotion in the artifacts they left behind. Consider the arcane egg. To the untrained eye it is merely a relic, a collectible to be sold to a merchant. But look closer, look at the structure of it. It is not a natural egg. It is constructed from a dark, smooth stone that seems to absorb the light around it. The surface is etched with spirals, endless, twisting patterns that have no beginning and no end. These spirals are not merely decoration, they are a philosophy. They represent the nature of the Void itself, a cycle of eternal return, a depth that goes on forever. The ancient civilization understood that the Void was not a pit to be filled, but a mystery to be embraced. In the Hall of Gods, high above in the dream realm, there stands a statue that gives us a glimpse of their beliefs. It is the Void Idol. It depicts a being not of shell and chitin, but of fluid darkness. The figure is smooth, featureless, holding a bowl as if offering a gift. This was their god, not a ruler who demanded taxes and laws, but a presence that offered peace. The bowl represents the vessel, the idea that the Void could be held, could be contained, and perhaps could be used to heal. They believed that by merging with the Void, by letting it fill them, they could achieve a state of perfect unity, a oneness with the universe that the individual mind could never comprehend. But something happened to this ancient civilization. They didn't die out in a war. There are no signs of a great battle in the abyss. They did not succumb to a plague, for the infection of the radiance had not yet bloomed. Instead, it seems they simply vanished. Or perhaps they succeeded. There is a theory, whispered by those who study the arcane, that the ancient civilization did not disappear from the void, but into it. They sought unity, and they found it. They walked down to the shores of the abyssal sea and they stepped in. They let the darkness wash over them, dissolving their shells, their minds, their individual identities, until they were no longer many, but one. The sea of void that lies at the bottom of the abyss is not just a liquid, it is a collective. It is the swirling, restless memory of an entire people who chose the peace of the dark over the pain of existence. When you stand at the edge of that sea, and you hear the faint, ghostly whispers rising from the black mist, you're not hearing the wind, you are hearing them. They are the voices of the ancients speaking in a language that no longer has words, a chorus of thousands singing a lullaby of eternal sleep. They are waiting, they are watching, and they are remembering a time when the world was quiet, before the light came to wake them up. This was the state of the world for an eon, silent kingdom of stone and shadow, ruled by a gentle, indifferent darkness. It was a time of peace, a time of rest, but rest by its nature cannot last forever. Eventually a new power would arrive. A pale light would appear in the ashfall of the kingdom's edge, and the great worm would shed its skin to be born anew. The era of the ancient civilization was over. The era of the Pale King was about to begin. And with his arrival, the void would be dragged from its slumber, forced into shapes it did not choose, and made to serve a purpose it did not desire. The change began not with a roar, but with a light. Far above the crushing depths of the abyss, in the desolate wastes of what would one day be, called Kingdom's Edge, a great worm died. This was a being of immense power, a creature of foresight and ancient magic. But in its death, it did not fade. It transformed. It shed its colossal armoured shell, a husk that would remain for centuries as a monument to its size, and from that shell emerged a smaller, paler form, the Pale King. The king brought with him a new kind of power. Unlike the void, which was a force of unity and silence, the king's light was a force of mind. It granted intelligence. It granted individuality. It granted the bugs of the caverns the ability to dream, to build, to name themselves. Under his influence, the scattered tribes of the underground began to coalesce. They built roads. They built stag stations. They built a kingdom. But the king was not content with the surface caverns. He was a being of immense ambition, and his foresight told him that his kingdom would need a foundation. And so he dug. He directed his subjects to delve deeper into the earth, carving out the royal waterways, the fungal wastes, and finally the ancient basin. It was here, in the deepest excavated chambers of his new empire, that the Pale King discovered the abyss. Imagine the moment of discovery. The king's miners, their pickaxes ringing against the stone, suddenly breaking through a wall of rock and finding nothing, just a vast, open emptiness stretching down into the dark. The air here was different. It was cold, still, and heavy with that ancient silence we spoke of earlier. The light of the lumafly lanterns would have flickered and dimmed, as if the darkness itself was eating the illumination. The king, however, did not recoil. He was a worm, a higher being. He looked into that pit and he did not see a threat. He saw a resource. He saw the void not as a god to be worshipped, but as a substance to be moulded. The construction of the ancient basin began in earnest. This was not the organic, leafy architecture of the Queen's Gardens, nor the humble stone masonry of the crossroads. This was industrial. It was cold. It was imposing. The king built great tramways to ferry materials down into the deep, metal cars suspended on thick cables, grinding their way through the dark tunnels. The tram pass itself, a simple item, tells a story of this era. It is a ticket to the bottom of the world, a symbol of the king's dominion over even the deepest places. The architecture of the basin reflects the king's mindset. The floors are lined with spikes, sharp silver thorns meant to keep the wild creatures at bay. The walls are reinforced with a heavy metal plating bolted into the living rock. It is a fortress, a laboratory, and a prison all in one. The king was trying to impose order on chaos. He was trying to build a box around the darkness. But the most significant construction was the lighthouse. Down in the abyss, on the shores of the void sea, the king ordered a great tower to be built. It stands there still, a lonely sentinel of black, stone and iron. Its purpose was simple, yet terrifying: to suppress the sea. The king knew that the void was reactive. It responded to emotion, to thought, to life. Left unchecked, the sea might rise, it might lash out, and so he built a light to keep it down. The beam of the lighthouse is not like the warm glow of the street lamps in the City of Tears. It is a harsh, piercing white beam that cuts through the black fog. It is a suppression field. When the light is on, the void is calm. The tendrils retreat. The sea is flat. But the cost of this safety was constant vigilance. A keeper was assigned to the tower, a bug whose sole purpose was to ensure the light never went out. We can find this keeper, or what remains of him, in the game. He sits in the lighthouse, staring out at the sea he was tasked to control. If we use the dream nail on him, we hear his final, desperate thought: turn it off. Cannot look. The void, it seems, does not like to be watched. And for the keeper, staring into that infinite blackness for years on end, the silence eventually became too loud to bear. With the abyss secured and the lighthouse keeping the sea at bay, the king began his true work. He did not come to the dark merely to observe it. He came to use it. The king had a problem, a vision of a plague that would one day threaten his kingdom, a light that screamed, a radiance that would infect the minds of his subjects. To fight this light, he needed a vessel. He needed something that could contain the plague without being corrupted by it. He needed a being of void. And so, the king turned the ancient basin into a workshop. He began to experiment with the substance of the abyss, mixing it with the soul of the worm and the root of the white lady. He created moulds, armoured shells that he would fill with the liquid darkness. The first results of these experiments were the king's moulds. You've seen them guarding the White Palace, tall, imposing figures in gleaming white armour. They have 4 arms, each wielding a deadly scythe. They move with a mechanical precision. But if you look closely at their joints, you can see the truth. They are not robots. They are hollow shells filled with void. When they are defeated, they do not break into gears and springs. They burst into black liquid. They are the king's attempt to give the void a shape, to force the formless chaos into a soldier's uniform. But the king's moulds were not pure. They were constructs, tools. They had no will of their own. but they also had no soul to contain the light. They were guards, not vessels. The king also created the wings moulds, the flying constructs that patrol the path of pain. These are even simpler, floating idols of white ceramic, trailing tendrils of void. They are electrified, dangerous, and utterly mindless. They serve as barriers, as tests for those who would seek the king's secrets. Then there is the Collector, hidden away in the Tower of Love, far above the abyss, but undeniably connected to it, lives a creature of pure void. The Collector is a strange, tragic figure. It is a being of black, shifting slime, moulded into a vaguely humanoid shape. It wears no shell, no armour. It is raw void given a semblance of life, and it is obsessed. The Collector spends its days capturing the grubs of Hallownest, sealing them in glass jars. It giggles and coos over them, protecting them with a manic intensity. Why? Perhaps the Collector is a failed experiment, a prototype king's mould that retained too much of the king's personality. The Pale King was obsessed with preserving his kingdom, with keeping it safe from change and decay. The Collector mirrors this obsession, but in a twisted, broken way. It tries to save the grubs by trapping them, by freezing them in time, just as the king tried to save Hallownest by sealing it in stasis. The Collector is a warning. It shows us what happens when the void is given a mind but no purpose. It becomes chaotic, erratic, and dangerous. The king saw this. He knew he needed something better. He needed a perfect vessel, not a construct like the king's mould, and not a chaotic accident like the Collector. He needed a child. And so we come to the darkest chapter of Hallownest's history. The king, in his desperation to save his people, committed an act of unspeakable cruelty. He and his queen, the White Lady, conceived children, thousands of them. These were not normal children. They were born in the abyss, their eggs placed down in the darkness so that the void could seep into their shells before they even hatched. The goal was to create a being that was hollow, no mind to think, no will to break, no voice to cry suffering, a being that was purely void on the inside, encased in a shell of the king's light. Imagine the scene. The bottom of the abyss, usually silent, now filled with the cracking of thousands of eggs. Tiny creatures, small and frail, crawling out of the shells. They looked like the night. Small bodies, white masks with empty eye sockets, little cloaks of darkness. They were the siblings. They were born into a nightmare. The abyss is a deep, treacherous pit. To prove their worth, to prove they were strong enough to be the vessel, they had to climb. They had to ascend the jagged cliffs, jumping from platform to platform, dodging the void tendrils and the sharp rocks. Most of them did not make it. They fell. They broke their shells. They were consumed by the sea, or they simply sat down in the dark and stopped moving, their tiny wills not strong enough to drive them upward. These are the ghosts we see in the game, the shades that float aimlessly through the abyss. They are the echoes of the children who died. They are not evil. They're lost. They attack the night not out of malice, but out of confusion, or perhaps jealousy of the one who is still alive. But some climbed. One, in particular, climbed higher than the rest. It ascended the great platforms, past the lighthouse, past the sea of its brothers and sisters. It reached the top of the abyss where the Pale King was waiting. We see this moment in a memory. The king stands on a high ledge, his white robe shining in the gloom. He looks down, he sees the vessel climbing up, and he sees nothing. He sees no fear, he sees no ambition, he sees no love, He sees a perfect empty void. "You are the hollow knight," he says. "You are the vessel. You are the pure vessel." He reaches out a hand. The vessel takes it, and together they walk away. But there is a tragedy in this moment that is easy to miss. As the king leads the chosen vessel away, the camera pans down. Hanging off the edge of the platform, struggling to pull itself up, is another vessel. It is our knight, the protagonist of the game. It reached the top just a moment too late. It looks up, reaching out a hand towards its father and its sibling. The king does not look back. The heavy metal door of the abyss slams shut. The seal is placed. The knight falls back down into the darkness. The abyss was sealed. The experiment was over. The king had his vessel, and the thousands of failures were locked away to be forgotten. The lighthouse was left running. The tram was deactivated, and the ancient basin was abandoned to the silence. The void, however, does not forget. It waited. It held the broken shells of the discarded children. It swirled around the bottom of the lighthouse, listening to the hum of the machine. It waited for the king's seal to weaken. It waited for the call. And it waited for the return of the little ghost who had fallen. For an age the abyss was silent. The heavy door bearing the king's brand remained shut, a seal of white light burning against the dark stone. Above, the kingdom of Hallownest rose to its golden peak, and then inevitably fell into ruin. The hollow knight, the chosen vessel, failed. The infection leaked out. The king vanished. The queen retreated to her gardens. The city of tears became a city of rain and husks. But down in the deep, nothing changed. Time works differently in the dark. While the surface world rotted, the abyss stagnated. The lighthouse beam continued to cut through the fog, a machine doing its duty long after its master had died. The sea of void churned and swirled, held back by the light but never truly tamed. Life, of a sort, continued here. In the absence of the king, the void began to reclaim the space. The metal platforms rusted, the spikes dulled, and strange creatures began to emerge from the shadows. We see the shadow creepers, tiny, scurrying things that look like drops of ink given legs. They are simple, mindless scavengers, feeding on the residual energies of the place. They are not aggressive. They are simply there, a sign that the void is not dead matter, but a living ecosystem. We see the void tendrils, great lashing whips of darkness that erupt from the sea. These are not creatures in the traditional sense. They are the fingers of the ocean itself, testing the air, searching for something to drag down. They are a hazard to any who would trespass, a reminder that the suppression of the lighthouse is not absolute. And then there are the siblings. The ghosts of the fallen vessels did not pass on. They could not. They are beings of two worlds, shell and void, matter and shadow. When their physical bodies died, their shades remained. They float through the caverns, drifting aimlessly in the dark. They are tragic figures, heads bowed, cloaks tattered. They do not speak. They do not dream. They only wait. What were they waiting for? For years, for centuries, they waited for nothing. They were the forgotten children of a dead kingdom. But deep down, buried in the instinctual memory of the void, there was a pull, a call. The king had branded the door, yes, but he'd also created a key. The king's brand, the mark of Hallownest's ruler, was the only thing that could open the abyss. And that brand was hidden away in Kingdom's Edge, guarded by the second hornet, waiting for someone worthy to claim it. The void waited. It felt the vibrations of the world above, the stomping of the false night, the screams of the radiance, the quiet footsteps of the wanderers. And then, one day, it felt something familiar. A presence, a hollow shell, a brother. The return of the knight to the abyss is one of the most atmospheric moments in the story. The knight, our protagonist, has travelled the breadth of Hallownest. It has fought gods and monsters. It has claimed the king's brand, the white mark burning into its shell. It stands before the great door in the ancient basin, the door that has been sealed for an age. The brand flares, the ground shakes, the heavy stone grinds open, revealing the darkness beyond. As the night descends, the air changes. The music of the basin fades away, replaced by a low ambient drone. It is the sound of emptiness. The echo effect on the knight's footsteps becomes pronounced, emphasizing the vastness of the space. The knight walks down the long winding path. It passes the broken tram, it passes the spikes, and then it reaches the bottom. The siblings are there. At first, they are hostile. They sense the life in the night, the soul it has gathered, and they are drawn to it like moths to a flame. They attack, dealing heavy damage with the touch of their cold bodies. They do not recognize their brother. Not yet. The night pushes forward, fighting its way through its own kin. It climbs the lighthouse, finding the switch that controls the great beam. If the night turns it off, the sea rises, the tendrils lash out, the darkness becomes aggressive. But if the light remains, the path is clear. The night is here for a purpose. It is looking for something the king left behind, something that was lost in the scramble to seal the door. Across the sea of void, in a hidden chamber, stands a statue. It is an ancient thing, perhaps dating back to the civilization before the king. It depicts a bug holding a bowl, much like the void idols, but this one is larger, more imposing, and in the bowl there is a pool of liquid shadow. The knight steps into the bowl. The shadow rises. It coats the knight's cloak, soaking into the fabric, soaking into the shell. This is the shade cloak. This is a pivotal moment. The knight is no longer just a vessel of shell and soul. It has embraced the void. It can now dash through darkness, becoming intangible for a split second. It has become one with the shadows. But there is more. In another room, a room filled with the screaming faces of stone, agony carved into the rock itself, the knight finds the abyss shriek. It stands on a pedestal and screams back at the faces. The void answers. A blast of dark energy erupts from the night, a weapon of pure sorrow. The night is gathering its power. It is reclaiming its heritage. But it is still incomplete. It is still just a vessel, a tool created by the king. To truly unlock the power of the void, to truly become the Lord of Shades, it must go deeper. It must find the place where it was born. It must find the birthplace. The birthplace is hidden. It is a secret within a secret, a pit at the bottom of the pit. To find it, the knight must go to the lowest point of the abyss, where the floor seems solid, and use the abyss shriek. The scream of the void shatters the ground, revealing a long, dark tunnel leading down. This is the descent into memory. As the night falls, the world fades. The stone walls disappear. The air becomes thick with white particles, essence, the substance of dreams. But this is not a dream of light. It is a dream of darkness. The knight lands on a platform of black rock, and there it finds an egg. It is a large black egg, cracked open at the top. It is the egg from which the knight was born. But it is not just an object. It is a gateway. By striking it with the dream nail, the knight enters a memory. We are back in the past. We are climbing the abyss again. But this time, we are not the knight as we know it. We are the newborn vessel. We are small, weak and desperate. We climb the platforms just as we did eons ago. We see the siblings falling around us, we hear the silence, and we reach the top. We see the pale king. We see the hollow knight being chosen. We see the door close. But then the memory shifts. The knight does not just fall. It remembers. It remembers the feeling of abandonment. It remembers the darkness. And in that moment of remembrance, something changes. The void is no longer a chaotic sea of separate shades. It is no longer a collection of lost children. It recognizes the night. It recognizes the will that has returned to claim it. The night wakes up from the dream. But it is different. The charm it wore, the king soul, the symbol of the union between the pale king and the white lady, has changed. The white half has turned black. The light has been consumed. It is now. The void heart unifies the void under the bearer's will. This is the turning point of the entire story. The night is no longer a discarded vessel. It is the Lord of Shades. It is the King of the Dark. When the night walks back up through the abyss, the siblings no longer attack. They stop. They turn. They bow. They recognize their master. The void. Tendrils recede. The sea becomes calm. The chaos is gone. There is only unity. The story of the void does not end in the abyss. It ends in the sky. Or rather, in the dream of the sky. The night, now bearing the void heart, has a choice. It can take the place of the hollow night, sealing the radiance away and continuing the cycle of stagnation. But the void heart offers a different path, a path of finality. The night travels to the junk pit, to the coffin of the God-seeker. It enters Godhome, the realm of the gods. It fights its way to the very top of the pantheon of Hallownest. It defeats the greatest warriors of the kingdom. It defeats the pure vessel, the perfect form of its sibling. And then it faces the radiance, the absolute radiance, the sun that never sets. The battle is fierce, light against dark. The radiance screams, unleashing beams of searing energy. The night fights back with nail and spell. But as the battle reaches its climax, something happens. The night's shell cracks, it breaks open, and from the broken shell the void erupts. This is not the small contained shadow of the night. This is the Shade Lord, a colossal four-armed giant of pure darkness. It is the ancient civilization's dream realized. It is the void given form, given focus, given will. The Shade Lord grabs the radiance. The light struggles, burning and thrashing, but the darkness is overwhelming. It is not a fight, it is a consumption. The Shade Lord drags the radiance down, pulling the sun into the sea. The light flickers, it dims, and then it is gone. The infection is purged. The plague is over. But what remains? The final scene of the game shows the God-seeker, the being who created this realm, staring in horror as the void begins to leak out of the dream and into the waking world. The black liquid trickles down from the ceiling of the junk pit. The darkness is rising. But remember the nature of the void. It is not evil. It is silence. It is rest. With the radiance gone, the screaming in the minds of the bugs stops. The madness ends. The world is left in a state of quiet. The void has done what the Pale King could not. It has brought true peace. It has brought the eternal sleep. And so, the story of the void ends as it began, with silence. The sea is calm. The siblings are at rest. The night has returned to the dark from which it came, and the world is finally, truly asleep. To fully understand the void, one must understand the forms it takes. It is a mutable substance, capable of mimicking life, but it is not life as we know it. The creatures of the abyss are not born of biology, they are born of intent, or sometimes of accident. Let us catalogue the denizens of the deep, observing them not as enemies to be fought, but as phenomena to be understood. The most tragic of all void creatures are the siblings. They are the shades of the vessels who died in the abyss, the brothers and sisters of the night. Physically they are simple, a floating head, identical to the night's but composed of darkness, with two hollow white eyes that stare without seeing. They have no legs, no arms, only a tattered cloak of shadow that trails behind them like smoke. Their behaviour is driven by a primitive instinct. They drift aimlessly through the caverns, often clustering together in groups, as if seeking comfort in numbers. When they sense a living being, or a being with a soul, they become agitated. They swell in size, their eyes narrowing, and they rush forward. This is not malice. It is a desire for warmth. They are cold, empty things, and they are drawn to the light of the soul like a moth to a flame. When they strike, they do not bite or claw. They simply pass through the victim, their touch draining the life force away. It is a cold burn, a sudden numbness that spreads through the shell. The sound of a sibling is distinctive. It is a low, oscillating hum, like the sound of wind blowing over the mouth of a bottle. When they attack, this hum rises to a sharp, discordant shriek. But when they are left alone, they are quiet. They float in silence, eternal monuments to the Pale King's failure. If the siblings are the ghosts of the abyss, the void tendrils are its teeth. These are not independent creatures, but extensions of the void sea itself. They appear as thick black lashes that erupt from the ground or the liquid surface. They are fluid, constantly shifting shape, but they strike with the force of solid stone. The tendrils are found in the deepest parts of the abyss, guarding the path to the shade cloak and the lighthouse. They are a defense mechanism. The void, in its raw state, is reactive. It senses intrusion. When a foreign object approaches, the sea lashes out. The tendrils move with a terrifying speed, whipping back and forth in a frenzy of motion. There is no reasoning with the tendril. It has no mind, no face, no soul. It is simply a hazard, a physical manifestation of the void's rejection of the light. To touch one is to be consumed. The darkness wraps around the victim, pulling them down, crushing the shell and absorbing the essence. They are a reminder that the void is not a tame pet. It is a wild, dangerous force of nature. The king's moulds represent the Pale King's attempt to impose order on the void. They are artificial beings, constructs of armour and darkness. Standing nearly twice the height of a normal bug, they are encased in gleaming white armour, a heavy, ornate plating that mimics the king's own aesthetic. They have 4 arms, each one ending in a sharp, curved scythe. But the armour is a cage. If you look closely at the joints, at the neck, the elbows, the waist, you can see the void leaking out. It bubbles and drips, a black ichor that stains the pristine white metal. The king's mould is a prisoner in its own body. The void within it wants to return to the sea, to lose its shape. But the king's magic binds it, forcing it to hold the form of a soldier. In combat, the king's mould is a terrifying opponent. It moves with a mechanical, jerky rhythm, swinging its scythes in wide, deadly arcs. It can throw its weapon like a boomerang, the blade spinning through the air with a heavy whoosh. But when it is defeated, the illusion of order shatters. The armour falls apart, clattering to the ground, and the void inside explodes outward. For a brief moment a shade appears, a twisted four-armed ghost, before dissipating into the air. The soldier is gone, only the darkness remains. The wings moulds are the aerial counterparts to the king's moulds, though they are far simpler in design. They are found primarily in the White Palace, serving as obstacles in the path of pain. They look like small floating idols, a white ceramic mask with a single vertical eye slit, trailing a long body of void tendrils. Unlike the king's moulds, the wings moulds do not fight. They do not chase. They simply exist. They float in fixed patterns, humming with a dangerous electrical charge. They are indestructible. You can strike them with a nail and they will shudder, perhaps retreat for a moment, but they will instantly reform. They are eternal sentinels, bound to their patrol routes by ancient spells. The sound of a wings mould is a high-pitched electrical buzz, overlaid with the wet, squelching sound of the void. They are a fusion of the king's technology and the abyss's substance, a perfect, mindless barrier that will never sleep, never tire, and never stop guarding the king's secrets. Of all the creatures of the void, the Collector is the most enigmatic. It is a being of pure darkness, a humanoid shape composed of black, viscous slime. It wears no armour, no mask. It is naked, raw, and unformed. The Collector resides in the Tower of Love, a location that is physically separate from the abyss but spiritually connected to it. It is obsessed with preservation. It captures the grubs of Hallownest, sealing them in glass jars. It has created a map of their locations, a checklist of its collection. Why does it do this? The Collector seems to be a reflection of the Pale King's own neuroses. The king wanted to preserve Hallownest, to keep it in a state of eternal stasis. The Collector mimics this desire but lacks the king's grand vision. It simply wants to keep things. It wants to protect the grubs from the dangers of the world, even if that means imprisoning them. The Collector's behaviour is manic. It laughs constantly. A high, gurgling giggle that echoes through the tower. It jumps and bounces with a rubbery energy, its body stretching and deforming with every movement. It is a creature of joy, but a twisted, selfish joy. It loves its collection, but it does not understand that a cage is not a home. Not all creatures of the void are grand experiments or tragic ghosts. Some are simply vermin. The shadow creepers are the insects of the abyss. They are small, round blobs of darkness with many tiny legs, scuttling along the floors and walls. They are the bottom feeders of this ecosystem. They do not attack. They do not seek the light. They simply wander, feeding on the ambient void particles that drift through the air. When struck, they burst with a soft pop, dissolving into nothingness. They are important because they show us that the void is capable of supporting life. It is not a sterile environment. It has a food chain. It has a biology. The shadow creepers are the plankton of the void sea, the simplest form of life that can exist in the dark. They are a sign that even in the deepest pit, life finds a way. Finally, we come to the entity that is not a creature but a god, the Shade Lord. The Shade Lord is the void given focus. It is the unification of every sibling, every drop of the sea, every particle of darkness into a single, supreme will. It appears only in the God Home ending, bursting forth from the shell of the night. It is colossal. Its form is shifting and indistinct, but it generally resembles a giant version of the night, or the hollow night, with 4 great arms and eyes that burn with a white-hot intensity. It is the king of shadows. The Shade Lord is the ultimate potential of the void realized. It is what the ancient civilization sought to achieve. It is a being of infinite power, capable of consuming the radiance, the god of light, without effort. It does not fight, it dominates. It grabs the sun and pulls it into the dark. The Shade Lord is not evil. It is simply absolute. It is the end of the cycle, the final silence that swallows the noise of the world. In the face of the Shade Lord there is no conflict, no pain, no division. There is only the void. The history of the void is not written in books. It is carved into stone, hidden in dreams and whispered by the dead. To truly know the abyss, we must read the words left behind by those who tried to tame it. Let us open the archive of shadows and examine the texts of the deep. Scattered throughout the ancient basin and the abyss are stone tablets, ancient markers left by the Pale King. They are instructions, warnings, and proclamations. Higher beings, these words are for you alone. This phrase begins many of the tablets. It is a sign of the king's arrogance. He believed that only those of his stature, worms, roots, and perhaps his own children, were worthy of knowledge. The common bugs of Hallownest were not meant to know the truth of the abyss. It was a secret kept by the gods. Our pure vessel has ascended. Beyond lies only the refuse and regret of its creation. We shall enter that place no longer. This tablet is found at the entrance to the abyss, near the great door. It marks the end of the king's experiments. Refuse and regret. That is how he saw his children. The thousands of siblings floating in the dark were not tragic losses to him. They were garbage, waste material. This text reveals the cold, clinical nature of the king. He did not mourn, he simply moved on. Void, yours is the power opposed, but yours is potential, eternity potential. Force that could deny time. Void, yours is the power opposed. This cryptic message is found in the hidden room where the abyss shriek is acquired. It suggests that the king understood the true nature of the void. Power opposed. Opposed to what? To the light, to the radiance, but also potential. The king saw that the void was not just a weapon, but a fundamental force of the universe, a force that could deny time. This aligns with the idea of stasis, of a world that never changes, which was the king's ultimate goal. The hunter, a mysterious predator who stalks the green path, has his own notes on the creatures of the void. His perspective is not that of a scientist or a king, but of a warrior. On the siblings he writes, "Fragment of a lingering will, void given form. The dead should not linger, they should return to the earth. But these things, they are not dead, and they are not alive. They are empty. I do not like to hunt them. There is no satisfaction in killing a shadow." Even the hunter who kills for sport and honour is unsettled by the siblings. He recognises that they are unnatural. There is no meat to them, no life to take. They are simply absences in the world. On the collector he notes, a dark figure locked inside the Tower of Love. It preserves the grubs in glass jars. Why? To keep them safe, to eat them later, or simply to own them? Obsession is a sickness. It eats the mind until there is nothing left but the desire to possess. The hunter sees the collector's madness clearly. He understands that the void, when given a mind but no purpose, turns inward. It becomes possessive. It becomes a black hole of desire. The most intimate secrets of the void are found not in stone but in the minds of the dead. Using the dream nail, we can hear the final thoughts of those who lived and died in the dark. The lighthouse keeper's final thought was simply, "Turn it off, cannot look." This simple phrase tells a story of unimaginable torture. The keeper was not killed by a monster. He was broken by the silence. He was forced to stare into the sea of void for years, perhaps decades. The darkness stared back. It whispered to him. It eroded his mind until he could no longer bear the sight of it. He died wishing for the dark just to escape the duty of the light. The king's moulds think only in fragments. Serve, protect, king. Their thoughts are simple, fragmented. They are not true minds. They are programmed instructions echoing in a hollow shell. The void within them has been lobotomized, forced to repeat the same commands for eternity. It is a violation of the void's nature, which is chaotic and free. And the pale king in the white palace thinks, "No cost too great." This is the mantra of the king. It is the justification for every atrocity. The murder of his children, the sealing of the abyss, the sacrifice of the dreamers. It was all for the kingdom. No cost too great. But looking at the ruins of Hallownest, looking at the sea of dead shades, we must ask, was the cost worth it? The void suggests that it was not. The void suggests that the only true peace is found not in the preservation of a kingdom, but in the acceptance of the end. Finally, let us look at the arcane eggs. These are not texts, but they contain knowledge. They are relics of the ancient civilization. When sold to Lem, the relic seeker, he tells us, "This egg, it is not from Hallownest. It is older, much older. The civilization that made this did not fear the dark. They embraced it. They saw the void not as an enemy, but as a source. A source of what? Life? Magic? Or perhaps peace?" Lem's analysis confirms that the fear of the void is a modern invention. It is a product of the Pale King's rule. Before the light, the dark was a friend. The Archive of Shadows teaches us that the history of the void is a history of perspective. To the ancients, it was a god. To the king, it was a tool. To the hunter, it was a horror. And to the night, it is home. The abyss is not just a concept, it is a place. It has a shape, a texture, and a geography. To walk through the abyss is to walk through the subconscious of the world. Let us take a final journey, a slow guided tour through the rooms of the deep, visualizing every shadow and every stone. At the very bottom of the main shaft lies the lake. It is a vast subterranean ocean of liquid darkness. The shore is not made of sand, but of fine black ash, the disintegrated remains of millions of years of erosion. When you step onto it, there is no crunch, only a soft, muffled thud. The liquid itself is thick and oily. It does not splash like water. It moves with a slow, heavy lethargy. If you were to touch it, it would feel colder than ice, a cold that seeps through the shell and into the soul. It is opaque. You cannot see beneath the surface. You can only imagine the depth, the miles of black water stretching down into the core of the planet. Dominating the lake is the lighthouse. It stands on a rocky outcrop, a tall jagged spire of black iron. The climb to the top is long and arduous. The metal rungs of the ladder are rusted, cold to the touch. Inside, the air is stale, smelling of ozone and old machinery. At the top, the great lamp burns. It is a blindingly bright arc light, buzzing with a high-voltage hum. The beam cuts through the darkness like a physical blade. It illuminates the particles of dust floating in the air, turning them into glittering stars against the black void. Looking down from the balcony, the lake looks like a sheet of black glass, perfectly still under the suppression of the light. It is a view of absolute terrifying peace. Hidden within the walls of the abyss are secret chambers, accessible only to those who know where to look. These are the arcane egg rooms. They are mazes of narrow tunnels carved by the ancient civilization. The architecture here is different. It is not the industrial metal of the king, but organic, swirling stone. The walls are etched with the same spiral patterns found on the eggs. The tunnels twist and turn, disorienting the traveller. There is no light here, save for the faint bioluminescent glow of the Lumafly lantern. The silence in these rooms is oppressive. It is a heavy, suffocating quiet. You can hear the blood rushing in your own ears. You can hear the scratch of your own footsteps. At the end of each maze, resting on a pedestal of black stone, lies an arcane egg. It sits there in the dark, waiting. A time capsule from a forgotten age. To find one is to feel a connection to the past, a sense of awe at the vast stretches of time that have passed in the dark. On the western wall of the abyss, there is a door that only opens to those who carry the blue blessing of lifeblood. Inside, the atmosphere changes completely. The oppressive blackness is replaced by a vibrant electric blue. This is the lifeblood core room. It is a sanctuary of life within the land of death. The walls are covered in blue vines, pulsing with a gentle rhythm. The air is filled with blue butterflies, lifeblood seeds, fluttering in the updrafts. The contrast is striking. Outside, the void absorbs light. Inside, the lifeblood generates it. The floor is covered in blue petals. In the centre of the room stands the lifeblood core, a massive beating heart of blue energy. It hums with a warm, nurturing sound, a stark difference to the cold drone of the void. This room is a reminder that the abyss is not monolithic. It contains multitudes. It contains the potential for life, even if that life is alien and strange. Finally, we must descend to the deepest point of all, the birthplace. To reach it, we must fall. We must jump into the pit created by the abyss shriek and let gravity take us. The fall seems to last forever. The wind rushes past, roaring in our ears, and then silence. We land on a floor of solid void. The ground here is not rock. It is fossilized darkness. We're walking on the bottom of the world. The air is thick with white essence, the dream dust of the past. As we walk forward, we see them. The shells, thousands of them, millions of them. They are piled high like drifts of snow, a landscape made of broken masks. These are the siblings who never even made it out of the egg. They are the foundation of the king's plan, the mortar in the walls of his palace. The feeling here is one of immense weight. The entire world is above us. The rock, the city, the kingdom. It all rests on this bed of broken children. But there is no anger here, only sadness, a deep abiding melancholy that permeates the stone. At the end of the path lies the black egg. It is the beginning and the end. Standing before it, we feel the full circle of the story. We were born here, we died here, and now we have returned. The geography of the deep is a geography of the self. To know the abyss is to know the night, and to know the night is to know that even in the deepest darkness there is a spark of will that can never be extinguished. The tour is over. The lights are dimming. The sea is still. Sleep well. To truly understand the story of the void, we must see it not as a series of events, but as a flow of time, a river of darkness that runs beneath the history of the world. Here is the chronology of the abyss, from the beginning of time to the end of the dream. In the first era, the Age of Ancients, The world exists in a state of natural chaos. The void is calm, a unified sea of potential. There is no light, no higher thought, only the instinct of the earth. The ancient civilization emerges, discovering the void and beginning to worship it. They build their cities in the deep, constructing the arcane eggs and the void idols. Eventually they achieve the great union. They walk into the sea and dissolve their individual identities, becoming one with the void. They leave behind only their artifacts and the whispers in the mist. Then comes the long silence. Eons pass. The abyss is empty of life, save for the primitive creatures like the shadow creepers. The world waits. Then begins the second era, the age of the worm. The Pale King arrives in Kingdom's Edge. He sheds his worm form and takes the shape of a bug, beginning to expand his influence and granting minds to the bugs of Hallownest. His miners breach the ancient basin and discover the abyss. The king sees the void as a resource to be exploited. He builds the tramway, the lighthouse, and the workshop, and begins his experiments to create a vessel capable of containing the radiance. The White Lady spawns thousands of eggs in the abyss. The siblings are born and die. The Hollow Knight climbs out and is chosen. The king leads the Hollow Knight away, sealing the door to the abyss with the king's brand. The knight, our protagonist, falls back into the dark. The third era is the age of stagnation. The Hollow Knight fails and the infection spreads. The king vanishes and the kingdom falls into ruin. In the absence of the king, the void begins to reclaim the abyss. The metal rusts. The siblings drift aimlessly. The collector, trapped in the Tower of Love, descends into madness. The radiance's power grows, waking the siblings from their slumber. They sense the shifting of the world. They wait for the return of the emptiness. Finally, we arrive at the fourth era, the Age of the Union. The knight returns to Hallownest. It claims the king's brand and opens the abyss. It acquires the Shade Cloak and the Abyss Shriek, and remembers its past in the birthplace. It unites the void under its will, becoming the Void Heart. The siblings bow. The chaos of the abyss is brought into focus. The knight enters Godhome and defeats the pantheon of Hallownest, becoming the Shade Lord. The Shade Lord consumes the radiance. The infection is purged. The void leaks into the world, bringing a final eternal peace. The language of the void is subtle. To speak of it is to speak of things that have no name. But for the sake of understanding, let us define the terms of the deep. Void, as a substance, is the black liquid found at the bottom of the abyss. It is not water. It is a semi-solid state of matter that absorbs light and soul. It is cold to the touch and has a high viscosity. It is the raw material of creation, the clay from which the world was formed. Void, as an entity, is the collective consciousness of the abyss. It is not a single mind, but a billion whispers acting in unison. It is reactive, responding to the emotions and thoughts of those around it. It seeks stillness. Soul is the energy of life. It is white, glowing, and warm. It is the power of the Pale King and the bugs of Hallownest. Soul allows for focus, for healing, for magic. It is the opposite of void. Where soul animates, void stills. Where soul burns, void consumes. A vessel is a being created by the Pale King to contain the infection. A vessel is a construct of 3 parts: a shell of White Lady root, a filling of void, and a binding of Pale King magic. A perfect vessel has no mind, no will, and no voice. It is a living vacuum. A shade is the ghost of a vessel. When a vessel's shell is broken, the void inside is released. It retains the shape of the shell for a time, held together by the lingering regret of the creature. A shade is not a soul. It is a memory of a void. Focus is the act of using soul to heal the shell. It is a channeling of life force. The void cannot focus. It cannot heal. It can only exist. When the night focuses, it is using the king's power, not the void's. The Lord of Shades is the ultimate form of the void. It is the state achieved when the void is given a singular will. It is a god of darkness, capable of overpowering even the gods of light. It is the silence at the end of time. The abyss is the physical location where the void pools. It is the deepest part of the world, the basement of reality. It is a place of memory, of regret, and of peace. Lifeblood is a blue liquid substance that grants health, but cannot be used for focus. It is taboo in Hallownest. Its relationship to the void is unknown, but they seem to coexist in the deep. Perhaps lifeblood is the dream of the void, a spark of colour in the endless black. Stasis was the goal of the Pale King, a world that never changes, never dies, never fades. Silence is the goal of the void, a world that is at rest, a world without the screaming of the light, a world that sleeps forever. And now, as we reach the end of our journey, let us take a moment to rest. The story is told. The history is written. The map is drawn. There is nothing left to do. There is nowhere left to go. Close your eyes. Imagine you are standing at the edge of the lake of void. The air is cool and still. The only sound is the gentle lapping of the black water against the shore. It is a rhythm, slow and steady. Lap, pause, lap, pause. Breathe in. The air smells of stone and old rain. It is a clean scent, free of dust, free of smoke. Breathe out. Let the tension in your shoulders melt away, dripping down like the black liquid, returning to the earth. You are safe here. The lighthouse beam is steady above you, a guardian of light in the world of shadow. But you do not need the light right now. You're not afraid of the dark. The dark is soft. The dark is heavy. It is a blanket wrapping around you, keeping you warm. Imagine you are sinking, slowly, gently, into the sea. Not drowning, but floating. The void supports you. It holds you up. It is denser than water, warmer than you expected. It covers your feet, your legs, your chest. It is a hug from the universe itself. Let your thoughts drift away. Like the siblings, let them float into the mist. They are not important now. The worries of the day, the tasks of tomorrow, they are far above you in the waking world. Down here, there is only the now. There is only the silence. Feel the weight of the world pressing down, not to crush you, but to ground you. You're at the bottom of everything. You are the foundation. You are solid. Listen to the hum of the earth. It is a low vibration, a lullaby sung by the stone. It resonates in your bones, slowing your heart, slowing your breath. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The ancient civilization knew this peace. They sought it for a lifetime, and now you have found it. You are one with the void. You are empty of stress. You are empty of fear. You are full of quiet. Sleep now. The king is gone. The radiance is gone. The war is over. There is only the dark, and the dark is good. Good night.